It's year-end season, and for the first time I won't be talking about music. I'll be talking about album artwork, and there have been some awesome artworks this year and some terrible ones, and we'll go ahead and rank them together. What is eligible for this list? Well, the rules are on the screen right now, so just pause if you want to see that, and then let's get into it. We're gonna start things off with Underoath's Voyeurist here, an album artwork that has actually been acknowledged as great by many people. The Grammys as well, they've gotten a Grammy nomination for this artwork, and I think I'll comfortably put it into the higher good tier. It's definitely not mid, but would I say it's iconic? Probably not, but good tier, definitely not boring, and offensively bad is would absolutely not hold up. Moving on, we got Skillet with Dominion, and while the album would definitely put it right here in the offensive category, I'm actually gonna go ahead and put it into the good tier as well. This is one of my favorite Skillet album covers since Rise, one of their best ones ever. It's a really cool picture, and it does kind of promise an album about Dominion, even though the album doesn't really work that well. Moving on, we got Dawn FM by The Weeknd, and I'm kind of tied between mid and boring. It's not badly executed, so it's not terribly offensive, but is it anything interesting? Is it like a great or interesting idea? Not really. I'm gonna go ahead and put it into the boring category because it doesn't really do anything for you. Next up, we have Amber Mark with 3 Dimensions Deep, which is a interesting album and a very interesting album artwork. A very well executed, cool idea. Not quite iconic, but out of the ones that we've had so far, I would definitely say it's my favorite, so I'm gonna put it up in the good tier. Next up, we got Billy Talent with Crisis of Faith, an album cover that does really tie well into the record. We got the Reaper riding away on a motorcycle from a nuclear explosion, which ties into songs like Reactor on the album, so great idea. Execution, not as awesome as it could be, so I'm gonna go ahead and comfortably put that into the mid tier. Next up, we got Ants from Up There by Black Country New Road. We got an airplane in a plastic bag, and it is simple. It is an intriguing idea, and I will go ahead and put this very, very comfortably in the iconic spot. Yes, I think that's an iconic album cover. I think that will go down as being very, very well remembered, especially with the album that is behind this, but that's just such an interesting cover idea, and it's instantly recognizable. I would put that in the iconic tier for sure. Next up, we got Slash and Myles Kennedy, who named their 4th album 4. And they have put about as much effort into creating a cover art for it. It is literally their logo, a 4 and some blurred image in the back. Is it terrible to look at? No, but it is definitely one of the most boring ones of the year. Next up, we have Slipknot with The End So Far, an album cover that is very convoluted, but that kind of fits the vibe of the album ironically well. Is it boring? No. Is it good? No. I will comfortably put it into the mid-tier section. Next up, we got FTHC by Frank Turner, an album that I enjoyed with an album artwork that screams a 5-year-old made this. Especially with a production value that high, you think you'd want to draw people into a very interesting album, but instead they are greeted by a sign that says maybe there wasn't too much effort put into this. So I'm actually gonna go ahead and put that album cover, even though I love the album, in the offensive category because it is offensively bad. Next up is Bastille's Give Me the Future, that is a mid-tier album cover. It is representing the themes of the album, however, the deluxe version that they've made with the Eye Opening and the Dreams of the Past album cover, all connected to this album, are all significantly better than the actual album cover, so Give Me the Future is definitely mid. Next up, we have an album that many call the album of the year, and if you want to see if I agree, wait for my top albums of the year list. I will say that I think that Bad Omens' Death of Peace of Mind album cover is iconic. That might be a controversial take, and if you disagree with that, that's fine. I think it's definitely arguable to put it in good as well, but I think the intrigue that is created by this album artwork is so strong, and then it leads into the album so well, that this is a really good fit for the iconic category, especially if I think about people praising this in 5 to 10 years or wearing this on their shirt. Yes, I can definitely see that this album cover does that. And I have another album cover right here, right next to it, and that is Avril Lavigne's Love Sucks, and I have those two right behind each other for a reason, because both of them are just take a red background and put something in front of the camera. And you can do that really well, like Bad Omens did it, and create an intrigue, create a mystery for the album artwork. Or you can do the boring approach and just sit someone in front of the camera. Just the artistic decision to have someone look into the camera bored, or someone not looking into the camera, like the camera isn't even there, like they're capturing a moment, makes such a big difference. And that's really the difference between Love Sucks, which I think is a boring album artwork, compared to The Death of Peace of Mind by Bad Omens. So Avril Lavigne goes into the boring category. Following Avril Lavigne, we have another one of our pop-punk revival artists with Machine Gun Kelly's mainstream Sellout, who, fitting to the album narrative and the narrative that he's got around his own person, gets tomatoes thrown at him, but they are pink. I don't think that this is offensively bad. I don't think this is even boring. I think this fits the album narrative really well, and we're not taking into consideration the quality of the album itself, because then the ranking system would be very different. I actually think this is mid. I think the idea is good, but it could have been executed way better. I think this is mid. I think this is definitely the lowest of the mids that we've had thus far, but it's mid. Next up, we have our next contender for the offensive category with Dorothy's Gifts from the Holy Ghost. If I look at this album artwork from far away, it looks like it definitely fits the description, but once you make that image just a little bit bigger, you will realize that the production value of that image is terribly low, and that this could have definitely been better with the bombastic amount of work that's behind the album itself. Could have spent a little more time perfecting the album artwork. For the level of quality that we have in the overall project, I find this album artwork to be offensively bad. Next up, we have another intriguing one by White Lies. We have all those different flags fitting very well with like this kind of theme right here. I'm not really portraying this correctly. It's like kind of like this, something like this is going on here with White Lies, as I try not to fall apart. Doesn't really fit the title of the album, but very well fits the vibe. I wouldn't quite say it's iconic, but I definitely think it's a good album cover, and I will comfortably put it behind Emma Mark's 3 Dimensions Deep in the good tier. Next up is 3 Days Grace, and there's a reminder for me mentally that this is only about the album artwork and not about the songs, with which I will put this into the mid above Billy Talent, because I do think that it is an interesting idea. The explosion represented in a heart that is exploding is cool, and with that idea they actually executed it rather well, especially compared to some of their earlier album artworks. I think this is definitely a step up, and I would put this into the mid. Although this is the worst album artwork since Matt joined and replaced Adam, but if you compare it to like their super early stuff, I think this is a solid album cover. It's mid, but the rest of the album is a different story. Anyway, next up is Ego Trip by Papa Roach. Papa Roach are a band that, despite being on their 10th or 11th album at this point, are still going strong and are still trying to keep up with the time and managing at that. So that's a really interesting new album. However, I despise the art style that they've chosen. I don't think it fits the album style or narrative at all. All the singles, at least to their credit, have had the same art style with the weird neon dystopian kind of thing. I just think that it is not the best idea, and then additionally not very well executed. So unfortunately, I'm gonna have to put that one into the offensive category as well, although it is my favorite in that category so far. Next up we have Rammstein with Zeit, an album artwork that is very simplistic but works surprisingly well for the theme of the album. This is a nuclear bunker that we're seeing, and this obviously ties in with the themes of transience and time on the album. This also was taken by Bryan Adams. I don't know if you know this, but Bryan Adams took those pictures for Rammstein, which is a pretty cool thing to know. I will actually put this into the iconic category. I think this is the best Rammstein album artwork that they've had thus far, and I think it ties in very well with the entire idea of the album, so iconic for sure. Next, we got Requiem by Korn. Myself in 8th grade would have been able to pull that off, take an image, put the opacity of a second image to 50%, write their Korn logo over it. It is not very interesting, it is not very unique, it is nothing that hasn't been done before, and it is just plain old boring, nothing impressive to look at. just like, and this is gonna upset people, I think that Ghost's Impera album artwork is also boring. Definitely the best one in the boring category, but I would actually not put it into the mid category because it just doesn't belong there. The album itself is of course a lot better, but it's convoluted, and it's convoluted with ideas that aren't very new, that have never been done before, and I think it fits in the boring category very well. Next we have an album that not a lot of people have probably heard, but I put it on here anyway because the album artwork is just so darn beautiful. Wolves at the Gate is this album artwork. The hand holding the rose on flames, I think it works really well as an intrigue to the album, and I will be very, very comfortably putting this into the good row, but I want to put it, no, just right in between here because I really like the Amber Mark album, but this sits very well, very high in the good tier thus far. Not in the good tier, we'll have Set It Off's Elsewhere. Especially if you look at the last couple of album artworks that Set It Off have done, this is just, I don't know what they were thinking. I don't know how they thought that anyone would take their album very, very seriously if this is the artwork that they're greeted by. It kind of ruins the vibe if you listen to it and you're like, hey, this is some very deep pop punk or some very fun pop punk. Why don't you go ahead and listen to this? And you just show them this album artwork and they're like, are you joking? I think it doesn't really fit the album very well. It's not badly executed, but I think the choice is just bad, and I would say it's offensively so. Obviously, offensively in this context is very, very lighthearted and comedic. I don't love everyone on this list. I like most of the people on this list, okay? Give me that. Moving on. Boston Manor's Datura is here. Very simplistic album artwork. We just got the title of the band, we got the title of the album, and we got a very simplistic picture. However, I like the kind of grid system. I like the diversion that the black on the outside creates. It is a very fitting album artwork at that, if you think about the fact that the tour is a concept album going from dusk till dawn and having this like dark, moody picture engraved in the black. I actually think this is a good album artwork. I will put it in the good tier, but I don't think it is better than any of the ones that are in the good tier as of now. Next up, we got both Red Hot Chili Peppers albums. The first one, I would say, is boring. Doesn't really add anything other than the fact that there is the Red Hot Chili Peppers and it says the name of the album and on a neon sign. There's nothing really enticing or exciting about that, but it is still a heck of a lot better than the second Chili Peppers album that we got this year, which has to be the worst album cover I've seen in a while. Convoluted in a weird art style that doesn't really add anything to the album. This looks like the worst kind of fan art, where the fan does only do fan art because they're obsessed with a band that they hate. I don't think that this is a very good album artwork. They've definitely had better ones in the past, and I think this is offensively bad. So especially when you think about the fact that the other album cover is at least decent. It's boring, but it's not bad. But yeah, Return of the Dream Canteen. Not so much. We got Wet Leg next with their album Wet Leg. This is just boring. I don't think I have to say too much about this. It's a picture. The picture doesn't have too much interesting things going on within itself. Nothing else here. The album itself is a lot more. It does weirdly fit the vibe of the album, but it's just nothing on its own. It's boring, but not offensively bad in any way, shape, or form. My favorite type of album art covers are the ones that throw in little details that you can dissect over long periods of time, and one of those album artworks is definitely Supernova by the Nova Twins. Bonus points for them because they did everything themselves and they designed this themselves. They CGI'd their robo clothes on themselves. They were standing there and like, I saw them talk about it in an interview with like a green screen points all over them, whatever. And the funnest thing about this album artwork is actually that all of the little things that you see floating around them are actually connected to the song. So every single thing is connected to one song. Like you see, for example, the puzzle piece is connected to the song Puzzles. There are like fighting things that are in there that are connected to the song Choose Your Fighter. And if you really want to dissect that, it's a fun little exercise to look at the album artwork and try to connect the song to the individual item in the album artwork. I think that's a great idea. I think it's executed well. Do I think it's iconic? No. I think then the execution would have had to be absolutely top notch. But I would definitely put it in the high good tier. Next up we have Hollywood Undead with Hotel California with a K. And while the album is definitely not their best work, I will say that the album artwork would kind of promise a well thought out, thought-provoking and critical dissection of one's own history in California. And if this is what we've got, maybe this would have even gotten into the good tier. I don't think this is a terrible album art. I don't think it's even boring. I would say it is mid. And therefore I will put it into the mid category comfortably around here. Next up is Muse with Will of the 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 People. An album artwork that actually fits in with the vibe rather well and is also not terribly executed. Is it iconic? No. Is it particularly a great idea? No. But I would say it's mid. Moving on, we have The Devil Wears Prada, Color Decay. And this is my favorite album artwork of the year, easily. I will put it into the iconic category. It is so intriguing. It fits the vibe of the album so well. It is depressing. It goes into all the directions that the album also goes in. You look at this and you look at the album and it is a perfect fit. I love it. It is interesting and it's iconic. Asphalt Meadows is the album title of the new Def Cab for Cutie album, and it actually works really well if you combine it with the album artwork that we have here. This is also only a picture like many of the others that we've had on this list. However, it is executed a lot better due to the fact that we have the asphalt meadows that they are singing about in the song and the album displayed on here. And we're really giving a sense of the extension of what asphalt meadows means to them as a band on this picture. Is it iconic? Definitely not. Is it good? Yeah, arguable. I would put it in the mid tier solidly. Next up is Euthanasia by Stray from the Path. We got the big button that you're not supposed to press with the bloody fingerprint on it. I will actually go ahead and put this one into the good territory. I think it's a good album artwork. I think it does wonders. It is simplistic, but it works very well. And it fits the vibe of the album, the brutality of the album with such a simple image really well. Pain Remains by Lorna Shore, one of the most talked about albums in the heavy scene of the year, with an album artwork that fits the title, and I can't show too big because I'm gonna get demonetized. Not that I am monetized yet, but YouTube would probably have a big problem with that. I will put this one into the mid tier. It is definitely not boring or offensive, but it is also not exceptionally good, so I think it sits solidly in the mid tier. Next up we got Architects with the classic Symptoms of a Broken Spirit. If you have simplistic album covers, you can pull them off really well or not well at all, and I think with the classic Symptoms of a Broken Spirit we are unfortunately in the not so well category. We just see a simple line of text in an interesting font. I will give them that. Is it offensively bad? No. It is boring though. It's not as boring as just putting the number 4 there, but it's boring. Complete Collapse is next by Sleeping with Sirens, an album that actually fits the album artwork really well. The apocalypse is being shown with people who are showing little to no care in an interesting art style, especially if you look at the entire artwork also on the back of the CD and the vinyl version. I think it's actually very interesting. It's not iconic, but I would say it is a good album cover and an album artwork that fits the vibe very well, so I'll put it into the good tier right here. Next up is Big Thief with Dragon New Warm Mountain, I Believe in You, is that the title? The very long and complicated title of one of the best indie albums of the year. It is again very simplistic, this little drawing that we see here, but I think it is very cute. It lacks a little bit in terms of being super iconic, but I will say it is a good album artwork and I will put it in the high good tier category. Next up is Nothing More with Spirits. They actually have one of my favorite album artworks of all time on their 2014 self-titled album because of the hidden message that is displayed in the album cover. Then 2017 they had a very iconic, perfectly for t-shirt vibe album artwork, and I don't think they quite continue this trend. It is definitely not boring or offensive, but it's also not iconic or great or even dead essentially exceptionally good, so I will put it into the mid category very comfortably. Next up is We Came as Romans with Dark Bloom, and it is a flower with the We Came as Romans logo inside, and it is blooming even though it is dark outside for the album Dark Bloom. I get it, but the art style is not very convincing in its entirety, and I will actually put this into the very comfortably so in the boring category. Not the worst thing this year, definitely not bad, but it's boring. It's nothing exceptional. Next up we have Willow coming in with her new album, with an album artwork that I actually think is quite cool. We got the TV, we got the smashed guitar through it. Is it wonderfully and iconically executed? I wouldn't say so, but I would say this is definitely a good album cover, so I'm definitely gonna put that into the good tier right there. And then next up we have one of my favorites of the year, Dayseeker with Dark Sun. This is simplistic, but this is definitely iconic, color composition wise. This sort of image and color definitely coincides with all of the synthwave vibes that we get on this album. So this is definitely a great pick for album artwork, and I will actually go ahead and put this into the iconic category. And even more so, we will now be moving on to Devin Townsend and Lightwork, which is, in my opinion, another iconic album artwork because it is simple. The little lighthouse definitely works well, and this is a very personal thing, but there's a squid on there. Octopuses are my favorite animal. I love squids, I love octopuses, they're awesome. And if you put that on your album cover, you're gonna get an iconic from me. And also the fact that everything is just very well executed, but it's an octopus, so that definitely has to go into the iconic territory. Moving on to Quadeca with Sorry for Dying. Album artwork that really fits the overall idea of the album really well, puts the weird mix and soundscape that you have on the album into a image, so that actually represents the album rather well. It's definitely not the best thing I've ever seen, but it is a good album artwork, so I'm gonna go ahead and put it into the good tier. Next up we have my countryman from Germany, Electric Callboy with Techno. With all of the different ideas and production value that is present on the album, just simply writing techno on a blank black thing and calling it a day is almost offensive, but it's definitely boring. I'm gonna put it into the boring category. I think it's a boring album cover. Moving on though, we have Jack White with Fear of Dawn, and that album cover is giving me a lot of Hitchcock vibes for some reason, interesting art style, and I think this is a good album artwork. I think it definitely fits the album really well, and I'm gonna put it into the good tier as well. Next up we have Motionless in White with Scoring the End of the World, and I think this is a really cool idea, having the world in a globe, a burnt hand, scoring the end of the world with all the fire in the background. Great idea, not as great execution. It is definitely not bad or boring or anything like that, but I wouldn't quite put it into the good tier. I will actually go ahead and put it in the high mid tier. I think it is not the best thing that I've seen from them, but it is definitely a great idea, and yeah, not the best execution, but it could be up there. Moving on, we have Taylor Swift with Midnights. Got the kind of grid. We have a very simplistic album artwork, but not a very simplistic one that fits very well with the overall vibe of the album. Anything that is darker would have maybe benefited the album, especially when we're talking about a concept album, Midnights, songs that are written or talking about midnight, and this definitely gives off a more jolly vibe. It does fit the soundscape aesthetic, but not very well the album aesthetic. I don't think it's boring, I don't think it's offensive, but I also don't think it's good. So I'm gonna put it into the mid-tier category right here is where I'm gonna put it, between Slipknot and Lorna Shore, where Taylor Swift sonically definitely belongs. Moving on, we have True Power. I will say that the Trauma album cover was kind of iconic, but trying to replicate it doesn't go over as well as it could have been. I still don't think it's boring or offensive, but I also don't think it's necessarily good. So I'm gonna put the True Power album cover into the mid-tier category, not next to Taylor Swift. We don't wanna interrupt the nice idea of Lorna Shore, Taylor Swift and Slipknot right there. And as we're moving into the end of the list, we have the last contender for our offensively bad list. We have Five Finger Death Punch with their newest album. Just like every Five Finger Death Punch album sounds the same these days, every album artwork looks the same and every album artwork looks the same kind of ridiculous. I get what they're going for, but I don't think it's particularly interesting and it's less than boring. So I'm gonna have to put it in the lowest tier possible. We do have Disturbed's Divisive on here, which I will say the album artwork does a better job at describing the divide than the actual album does. Is it boring? Not really. It does kind of do things, but it definitely isn't good, and it is a very good pick for the mid-tier category. I'll put it somewhere low in the mid-tier, maybe like this is kind of a good placement for it. And finally, the last album artwork that we're going to talk about in this list. If you've made it all the way to Kendrick Lamar's Mr. Morale and the Big Stepper, please do me a favor and subscribe, because these videos take a lot of effort. And with that, let's rank this album artwork. It is close to being iconic, I'm not gonna lie. Even though it is just a simple picture, it is such a powerful picture that encapsulates the vibe of the album so much better than some of the other pictures that we've seen. I wouldn't quite say it's iconic, but I will definitely say that it is a good album cover and that it works surprisingly well for the fact that it's just a still photograph. And I'll actually go ahead and put it somewhere, maybe here. I think this is a good placement for it, in the good tier. If you have anything that I've missed that I might have enjoyed as an album cover, as an album in itself, make sure to drop a comment down below. And with that, I'll see you in the next video, because I have made a lot of videos for year-end season. There's a playlist right here that you can check out, and if that doesn't fit you, then maybe one of those videos will.